Today is Wednesday, March 10th, 2016. Thanks for tuning in to NatureHacker Mind. I am your host, NatureHacker. Today, we are going to discuss my current plans and aspirations, and also we are going to discuss part 2 of a story of my worst spring break ever. Thanks for tuning in to NatureHacker. Welcome to NatureHacker Mind. I am your host, NatureHacker. So eventually, this podcast will include music that I make myself. I love trance music, and I intend on making my own trance music, so that may be coming soon. I'm working right now on learning how to use programs on iOS to compose music, so I'm very excited about that. So my interests are quite wide, and the reason why I do so much to do with health and natural health is because basically out of necessity. I have always been interested in it, but I've really focused in on it because of necessity. I feel that no one will take care of me out there as far as my health is concerned, and there's not that much good information out there on health, so I may as well take it into my own hands. And other things, and so I do it out of necessity, but I also enjoy it. And so I started when I was young, and there's just not that much info out there. I mean, the medical doctors are all taught basically by the pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical companies write the curriculum for the med schools, just like the legislators and the lobbyists. The lobbyists write the laws for the legislatures to pass, like these trade deals that are hundreds of thousands of pages, and not only have the lawmakers not written it, but they don't even have time to read all of it. I mean, it would be their entire goal of their 4-year term just to read this one trade deal. So what happens is these lobbyists write the laws, and legislatures just pass it, and that's exactly what happens in medicine. The pharmaceutical companies create the drugs and teach the med schools, actually produce the curriculum of the med schools, and the doctors just follow in line. So it's not a surprise that doctors don't really know much about health. I mean, all that they learn in med school is very serious diseases and what they look like and how to diagnose them. But when it comes to actually improving people's health, people who are not on death's door, they don't know how to do that. If somebody complains of being tired, they don't know what to do. If somebody complains of not having enough motivation, they don't know what to do. They may be told by the pharmaceutical companies to prescribe a drug for that, but it's not something that's going to fix them. It's something that is a Band-Aid at best. At worst, it's like treating an open wound with mercury. Yes, the mercury will kill bacteria, but it will also poison the patient, and all pharmaceutical medicines are poisons. So I basically do it out of necessity, that I want to improve my health, and I believe, it's out of a belief that I can improve my health, that I can get better, that if somebody else is out there healthy and happy and has a lot of energy, so can I. There's nothing saying that I can't. The traditional belief is that genetics is different. It's, somebody else has better genetics than you. I don't believe that. I believe that our genetics are merely a symptom The genetics are a blueprint. I mean, it's something that's effected. That our genetics were born. We were born. Let's say that we were, in a perfectly sterile womb and whatnot. We're born with, perfect genetics basically, and that viruses infect the cells and actually change the genetics, and we know that is the case. And a lot of genetic problems that occurs in the womb is actually because there was infection with virus and bacteria in the womb. So genetics is not a cause. Genetics is an effect, and we can improve our health by, for one, reducing the amount of bacteria that's in the body, and also, therefore, viruses, because virus is co-inhabits with bacteria. So I've spent a lot of time researching health because it's necessary, and I feel that health is a foundation for a successful life. So that's why I focus so much on health. But other things that I'm interested in are mechanics. Mechanics basically comes naturally to me. My dad was a mechanical engineer, my brother's a mechanical engineer, and I can design mechanical devices without much trouble. And I mean, I really haven't gotten all that much better at that since having going to school for mechanical engineering. I basically had just inherent knowledge in it, and nothing really has changed with how I would design mechanical things even after going to college for mechanical engineering. I already had it in me. Most of what we learned in mechanical engineering in college was how to analyze and basically optimize design. So let's say you have a car that needs to withstand an impact of 500 newtons. We could design for that. But in the real world, you just over-design things. You have an inherent ability to just know that, okay, you need to use thick steel for this. You need to use thinner steel for this. You don't really have to do all the calculations. The only time you need to do the calculations is when you're working for a crappy corporate company that is trying to pinch every penny that they possibly can, to an extent that it would freak you out if you knew how penny pinching they are, even on airplanes, that they fly airplanes with cracks in them every day. Every airplane has cracks in it, and what they do is, quote unquote, monitor the cracks, and they do calculations to see if the cracks are likely to fail. If they're not likely to fail, they will send the plane in the air. So these companies are just horrendous, and it doesn't take a mechanical engineering degree for you to know that you don't need to do this analysis. You just need to make the planes or the cars right the first time. You don't have to analyze so that you can save a penny on a repair that you don't need to do, which in reality you should do anyway. So mechanical engineering degree is basically worthless in the real world. Real world being the world without corporate fascism. Now, in addition to mechanics being interesting to me and health, I am also interested in electronics, being able to make circuits that do things that we need. Like let's say I want to make a timer circuit where a light turns on for a certain amount of time. A lot of what I think and what I do is based on the idea that, society may break down, and all these specialized workers aren't going to be able to recreate in the real world what they're leaving behind in the corporate world. So if the grid goes down and we lose electricity and we basically are launched into, a third world nation where we have no electricity or running water, these people who work in electrical engineering companies, they're not going to know how to restore our power. They're not going to know how to build electronics from scratch because they are specialized in their one little teeny field of maybe they make one little brand of microcontrollers. They don't understand all of electronics to be able to rebuild society from scratch. So I like to gain these types of knowledge so that I could be one of those people who helps rebuild society from scratch, that I could have such a wealth and pool of knowledge to draw upon, not only to make certain things myself, but to teach others and help others rebuild our society. So I feel that making electronics from scratch is important, and being able to make circuits that don't require microcontrollers. Microcontrollers are susceptible to solar flaring and EMPs, but you can also make these circuits with only transistors. You don't need microcontrollers, and transistors are impervious to any kind of destruction, from EMPs to solar flares to actual people trying to destroy the electronics. Like with a pulsed magnet or something, they wouldn't be able to destroy a pure transistor thing. So I like this, and I like thinking about making these types of things. And other things that I'm interested in is C programming. C is the most basic programming language that exists, and knowing C, you can write operating systems. You can make your own Windows. You can write video games. You can write programs that fulfill a certain function. Like, let's say I write a program where you input your temperature and you input your rainfall and you input all these variables, and you can even use sensors to automatically input these variables, and it will predict things for you. It'll either predict the weather, or it'll predict how fast evaporation would happen from a swimming pool, for example. So you can make quite useful programs, and that goes hand in hand with electronic devices. So those are some of the things that I'm interested in. And one other thing that I'm interested in, as far beyond mechanics and electronics and computer programming and health including chemistry, nutritional chemistry. I'm also interested in music, and my favorite type of music is electronic music called trance music. Trance music is a very emotional and melodic type of electronic music that's very soothing and very calming and very inspirational. I enjoy inspirational music, so that also goes right in with programming and electronics. So if the grid did go down, and if we lose everything, theoretically, I want to be able to, make synthesizers, to make electronic instruments, and then to program them with C programming, and to be able to make electronic music, even if society crashes. So electronic music is interesting because you're a composer. When you make electronic music, you're a composer. You take samples of different instruments, be it an electric guitar, be it a drum, be it a flute, whatever, be it vocals. You take samples, you record certain sounds, and you compose them. You manipulate them. You throw them through electronic devices in order to tune the frequency, to tune cutoffs, to tune waveforms, to where you can make interesting and inspirational music out of these samples. So the electronic musician is a composer. He will listen to somebody playing the guitar, he will record some of it, and then he will use that and put it into his bank of sounds, and he will use that and manipulate it to make beautiful songs. So I'm very interested in being able to do that, and there are iOS apps to allow you to do that. So I'm going to start with that just to get a feel for it. So that's basically where I'm at, and I just want to thank people who supported me. I've been able to, on just meager means, be able to basically make an entire library of medical textbooks to be able to reference, and also stocked a full laboratory to do my nutritional chemistry production. So it's been quite an amazing ride. I wanted to get back to the story that I left off yesterday, the story of my spring break in 2006 being stranded in Mexico. So where I left off, I was pulled out of the car. This is coming back up from Mexico, and this was in Arizona. And I was slammed against the car and put into handcuffs. And the reason for that was because the cop thought I was evading arrest, which I really wasn't. I just didn't know that he wanted me to pull over. Anyway, so that happened, and then so he left me handcuffed. He ran the plates and things like that. And he came back and he started talking to me. I don't really know why. And he said, I don't know, you're talking about what I did and things, and I was like, I'm into natural health. This is when I was still in college, and he asked what I was studying and things like that. And at that point, I didn't have a major. I was thinking of going to California to study herbalism. I had dropped out of my physics major at that point, and I was just taking classes I thought were interesting. And he talked about, Andrew Weil, and he has a friend that's really into that stuff. So that was interesting, but he still was an ass to me. So, by throwing me against the car, handcuffing me. So anyway, I was driving my friend's car, but obviously I was the one ticketed. But it was weird because I know that I was going 74. At that point, the speed limit was 65. I knew I was going 74, so I was only going 9 over, but he ticketed me for going 95 miles an hour, so that was bizarre. I knew that I wasn't going 94 miles an hour. So what I did was I got my friend's car. When I got back home, I got my friend's car tested. And what happened was then I basically dropped myself off, but what had happened was I had lost my key, so I just sat in the backyard of my apartment for hours and hours, and this was on a weekend when the office was closed, so I couldn't get into my place, and I was calling the office manager, and I was having trouble and couldn't get in, and sitting on my back porch, and there was the swimming pool nearby, and there was tons of mosquitoes. I was just getting eaten up by mosquitoes, and I was just freaking out. I was afraid of everything, just afraid of birds. I was just paranoid totally because I was just totally frazzled, just totally fried from this whole situation of being stranded in Mexico, being exposed for hours and hours and dehydrated and driving through the night and just was just thrown against a cop car and handcuffed, and it was just a horrible, horrible experience, and so I was totally utter paranoia at that point, and so then finally somehow I got a hold of my office manager. They let me in my apartment. So then the very next day I was scheduled to go on a ski trip with my family, so I didn't want to miss it, so I tried to sleep that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept having nightmares as soon as I would fall asleep, and I was just, delirious and just in bed, and it was just a terrible experience. Couldn't get any rest, and then the next day I had to wake up to drive to my parents' place, which is hours away. And so I did it, and I got there, and my parents could just tell that I was just really... I was just probably really weird. I probably had my pupils were probably dilated. I was probably still, from those pop brownies and stuff days before, but just all of the stress and not being able to sleep and everything. I was just probably just totally frazzled, like I was on hallucinogens, and so they were very worried about me. And so we finally made it off that night, and in the car, I couldn't sleep. I was just so frazzled, just so paranoid, just so off the wall. My mom was so worried about me, and I was trying to lay down in the back of the car and sleep, and I just couldn't sleep, and so she wanted me to try to eat, but I couldn't eat. I just could not eat. I don't know, I can't explain the feeling. I just couldn't do it. It was just too weak, too frazzled. So I was just laying there, unable to sleep, and just, we were driving at night, and my mom was driving against head-on traffic, at like very high speeds, on a highway, and it was just really nerve-wracking for her as well. And I just prayed. I'm just like, God, I pray that you would help me right now. And at that moment, everything turned around from darkness, from the spiral into hell. I felt a glimmer of hope, and I felt like I was now on the path to improving and to getting better. And so then I was able to eat a little bit, I was able to rest a little bit, and I started to improve. So we got to the ski resort, early in the morning or whatever. We were driving during the night, and when we I guess went to sleep, and then woke up to go skiing. And I remember that I still was frazzled, still kind of messed up, and I was looking at footprints and stuff in the snow, and I felt like I could reverse engineer everything that had happened in the past at that one point, at that place. And I was obviously wrong, but I felt like I could piece together all of the evidence and see what had exactly happened in the past. It's an interesting thought. It's an interesting feeling, that where you can look at something and you can see the signature of everything that has been there or touched it or interacted with it. So it's like the earth has memory. The earth is a recording disc, and if you could read it properly, you could see the past. You could see the history in the earth, just like an archaeologist studies the earth and artifacts and things, and can piece together what happened in the past, can rediscover and relive history by seeing the evidence left behind. I felt like I could do that. And we all can do that to some extent, but when my mind was carried away, I thought that I was better at that than I really was. And so we went snowboarding and doing jumps and things, and I think my brother was there. And we went home. And so what ended up happening was, for that ticket that I got, I had to go to court. So I went, I had to drive back. That was in a certain city in Arizona, and I had to drive back there for court, which was hours drive away from my place. So I had to go there, and I get there, and they said, "Oh, the officer isn't here, but we strongly recommend that you talk to I don't know, what was the courthouse attorney or something." So I'm like, all right, fine. But that was a red flag. I should have held them to that and been like, well, the officer wasn't able to come. I mean, I made it here. I want to have the court date. If the officer doesn't show up, he doesn't show up. You still can have the court date. So I didn't realize that I could have done that, and I should have done that. And secondly, I should not have talked to the court attorney, because that ended up hurting me. But anyway, I went and talked to him, and he was asking me questions. I was like, yeah, I was only going 74. I don't understand why I got a ticket for 95, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, were you ever going 95? I was like, well, I did pass cars at some point, so I mean, maybe when I was passing a car, I reached that speed, but I wasn't passing any cars when I was any time around when the officer pulled me over. And I was like, okay. Now, I thought that was my attorney, but it turns out the next time I showed up to court, the next court date, that attorney was representing the police officer. So they totally entrapped me. They totally turned it around on me. And now that that attorney that I had confided in was now on the bench against me. So I was representing myself, and I basically cross-examined the officer when he said how fast I was going. I was like, how did you record my speed? He's like, oh, just visual. And I'm like, what is the process for, doing visual speed inspection, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, you just estimate it, you take a class to do that. And I was like, when was the last time that you took a class to estimate speed? He was like, oh, it's got to be 30 years ago. And I was like, do you think it might be time to renew that? And he's like, yeah, probably. And I just looked at the judge, and the judge just was wide-eyed, like, wow. Basically, I really worked him on that. But then they examined me, and they were like, how fast are you going? I was like, 74. They're like, well, how do you know that your speedometer was correct? I was like, well, I got it tested, and here are the results, and it was right on. They're like, wow, okay. But they're like, were you ever? So he used what I confided in him. He used it against me. And he said, did you ever go above the speed limit? I was like, yeah, I went, I might have gone close to the speed I was recorded at when I was passing somebody, but I wasn't necessarily I was not passing somebody when the officer pulled me over. And so at the end, the judge says, well, he's like, because of your admission that you were going that fast, I'm going to have to let that stand, and but I'm going to give you the smallest possible fine for that. And that fine was just $500, which is a lot, but I could have been in jail or whatever, and the fine could have been much bigger if they would have thrown the book at me. So that was that. And so that was pretty much the story, and I think that's pretty much it. The only thing after that was basically after that spring break, I had went back to school, and that I had met with that the Bible study leader from that cult church. And since I had such a bad spring break, I ended up joining that church, basically, kind of sort of out of desperation, just kind of at a loss, I was just at a loss, and I joined that church. And I knew from the beginning that it wasn't right, because they were like, you need to join the church that you're called to join. I'm like, what, that makes sense. I'm going to go around, and I'm going to go to a bunch of churches and see, what church is right for me. And he's like, no, you just come to our church, and here's our membership manual. So they basically just inundated me like, no, you don't try any other churches, just come to our church, blah, 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 and you should become a member right away. And so I just kind of went along with it. He was like, this is the church that helped win you to God and everything, so this is the church you should be in. So I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea and stuff. And this is a church with college students and everything, so I just went with it. But anyway, so that was that, and I was in that church for the next 6 years, from 2006 to 2012. And there are many, many more stories in that period of time, which I will get to in another day. So that's pretty much it for today. That is what I wanted to talk to you about. Other updates on what I'm doing. I got some books. I have a book on herb, a very comprehensive book on medicinal herbs. I have a book on medicinal herbs and all of their phytochemical constituents. So these are basically chemicals that are present in the herbs that give the herbs their desired effect. So I have a book that lists all of the uses of herbs, and then I have a book of all the herbs and what their chemicals are in them. And then I have another book of all of the plant-based chemicals and what their activities are. So what I'm doing with all of those books is I am creating my own book, which will be called Antimicrobial Herbs. And it will be a book of all of the herbs that have antimicrobial properties. So What you would be able to do with this book is you would be able to look up, okay, I have a gram-negative bacterial infection. How could I treat this with herbs instead of antibiotics? So that is what it would be for, is basically an alternative, a book to help you know what herbal alternatives there are for antibiotics. And not only when you have an infection, but I believe that many health issues, many common health issues, everything from heartburn to coughing to fatigue, to chronic fatigue, to stomach pains, things like that, to headaches, migraines, all sorts of things are actually caused by chronic infection from certain microorganisms. So with plant-based antimicrobials, you can treat these conditions all naturally. If you know what types of bacteria cause these issues, also Lyme disease, of course, Candida, things like that, you can look in my book and find out which herbs can help treat that for you. So the main reason I wanted to make that book is because I wanted a book that had all of the herbs with antimicrobial properties, because I'm formulating products, my own products to kill certain types of microorganisms. So I wanted a comprehensive book on all of the antimicrobial herbs that can kill those organisms so that I can formulate the best product possible. So that's the reason I'm writing this book, but I will end up making these products before the book is done. But what the book will do, it will serve as a future reference to when I want to improve the product. I can go to this book and find out what herbs to consider further for addition into my product in the future. So that's where I'm at with that book. So thanks for listening. Thank you for joining Nature Hacker Mind. I'll see you tomorrow.